Tonight, he invited me back. I stood outside the Orion Summit Club on Christmas Eve, watching my breath turn to frost in the sharp New York air. 7 years had passed since I last saw my family. 7 years since I walked away from everything they believed I would never have. And now, here I was. A simple black dress. Something you could find in any department store. A handbag cheaper than the appetizers they were serving upstairs. I chose it that way. I wanted to see their faces, to find out if anything had changed, or if they would still look at me the same way they always had, like I was a disappointment wearing human skin. The doorman gave a polite nod as I approached. When I said my name, there was no flicker of recognition. Why would there be? To the world, Coraline Kensington had disappeared. A ghost who walked away from Manhattan's polished circles and never came back. But I knew something they didn't. And by the end of tonight, they would too. I pushed through the heavy glass doors and stepped inside. Crystal chandeliers spilled light across marble floors. The air carried that unmistakable scent of wealth that had existed long before me and would outlast most people in the room. Somewhere in the distance, a string quartet played. Waiters in pristine white jackets moved silently, balancing silver trays of champagne. This was my father's world. A world built on power, reputation, and numbers large enough to define a man's worth. A world where names opened doors, and mine had been erased. I had once tried to belong here. The maitre d' guided me through a series of private dining rooms until we reached the one reserved for the Kensington family Christmas dinner. I paused at the entrance. Through the frosted glass, I could see silhouettes shifting, hear the low, controlled rhythm of my father's voice commanding the room like it always had. Miles Kensington, CEO of Kensington Capital Group. A man who built his empire on precision, control, and the absolute certainty that he was never wrong. I opened the door. The room fell silent. Every head turned. My mother, Naomi, froze mid-motion, her wineglass hovering just below her lips. My brother, Ethan, stood near the window, his expression shifting too fast to name, shock, guilt, maybe even relief. His wife, Lydia, pressed her hand to her chest, like she was watching something inevitable unfold in slow motion. And at the head of the table, my father. He looked older. The silver in his hair had spread, deeper lines cutting into his face. But his eyes were exactly the same, cold, measuring, calculating, weighing everything. And everyone, against a standard only he understood. Coraline. He said my name the way someone mentions an underperforming stock. You actually came. You invited me. I did. His lips curved slightly. I thought perhaps time had taught you something. He gestured to a chair at the far end of the table, as far from him as possible. Sit. We were just discussing the new partnership with Langford Capital. I took my seat without speaking. A waiter appeared beside me, offering champagne. I accepted it, though I didn't drink. I needed my mind clear tonight. The conversation resumed. But it didn't include me. It moved around me. My father spoke at length about expansion, strategy, growth. His voice filled the room with certainty, with inevitability. The others, business partners, old family acquaintances, nodded along in quiet agreement, like their role had been rehearsed. Not one of them asked where I had been. I might as well have been part of the furniture. 30 minutes into the meal, my father set down his knife and fork with deliberate care. He dabbed his lips with his napkin, then turned toward me. So Coraline. His voice carried just enough to silence the room. I have to ask. A pause. Are you still working at that diner? Or have you finally found a real job? The question landed exactly as he intended. Calculated. Public. Humiliating. I'm doing fine, Father. Fine. He repeated the word with a faint smile. Fine is what mediocre people say when they have nothing to show for themselves. He glanced around the table, making sure every eye was on me. Do you know what I was worth at your age? He continued. I had already made my first million. I sat on the board of 3 companies. I was building something real. A slight tilt of his head. I remember. And what have you built? He leaned back, spreading his hands as if presenting evidence. What do you have to show for 31 years of life? A small apartment somewhere? A car that barely runs? For a moment, heat rose in my chest. The old feeling, the old anger, the old shame. For a second, I was 24 again, standing in his study, listening as he called me a failure, a waste, a daughter he wished he had never had. But I wasn't 24 anymore. I have enough, I said quietly. He laughed. It wasn't kind. Enough. He shook his head, amused. Listen to that. She has enough. His gaze sharpened. Do you know the difference between people who have enough and people who have everything? A pause. Ambition. Drive. The willingness to do what it takes. Miles. My mother's voice was soft, uncertain. Maybe this isn't the time. No, Naomi. His eyes never left mine. This is exactly the time. He leaned forward slightly. I invited you here tonight because I wanted to give you one last opportunity. One more opportunity to admit that I was right all along. His voice was calm, controlled, sharpened for effect. You should have joined the company. You should have learned the family business. Instead, he lifted his wine glass, slowly swirling the liquid inside. You threw everything away for some ridiculous fantasy about technology and computers. A pause. Then, with quiet precision, so tell me, Coraline, when you look at your empty bank account and your empty life, do you finally understand what you gave up? Silence fell across the table. Every eye was on me. I could feel it, the weight of their judgment, their pity, their quiet satisfaction at watching Miles Kensington put his wayward daughter back in her place. I set my napkin down carefully, then I met his gaze. I understand a great many things, Father. He waited. Of course he did. He expected me to break, to apologize, to reach for his approval like I had done my entire life. He expected me to admit he had been right, that I had failed. Instead, I smiled, small, controlled, almost invisible. But something about it made him pause, just for a second. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face, the expression of a man who suddenly senses that the game he believes he's winning might not be as secure as he thought, because he didn't know. None of them did. No one in that room understood what I had been building in silence. No one in that room understood the algorithms I had designed, the models that quietly outperformed everything on Wall Street. Even fewer of them saw the full picture, the investments, the strategy, the empire I assembled piece by piece while they were busy pretending I didn't exist. The very man my father was so eager to impress tonight, Victor Langford, already knew exactly who I was. They had no idea the founder of CK Quantum Fund had been sitting in front of them the entire time. Not one of them realized that everything they measured success by, I had already surpassed. But that wouldn't last. By the end of the night, the truth wouldn't be something they could ignore anymore. And my father, the man who told me I would never amount to anything, the man who cast me out, the man who mocked my empty life in front of his carefully chosen audience, would finally understand what consequence looks like when it arrives without warning. I lifted my champagne glass, took one slow, deliberate sip. The betrayal had started years ago. Tonight, it ends. I grew up in a house that looked like a museum and felt like a courtroom. The Kensington estate sat on 12 acres of perfectly maintained land in Westchester County, a Georgian mansion with more rooms than most people could count. Staff moving quietly through hallways lined with antique furniture that probably belonged in auction houses. From the outside, it was the American dream made visible. White columns at the entrance, a circular driveway of polished stone, a fountain that ran all year, even in winter when the heating cost alone could have supported a family for months. My father bought that house the year I was born, a monument to his success. He was 31 then, the same age I am now, already controlling one of the fastest-growing firms in finance, already worth millions. That house was meant to represent what ambition could build. Instead, it became something else. A place where everything looked perfect, and nothing felt safe. My earliest memories aren't of warmth, they're of silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that sits heavy in the air, where every word feels like a risk. My mother moved through that house like she was trying not to disturb anything, arranging flowers, supervising staff, making sure everything was flawless before my father came home. She never raised her voice. She loved me, just never enough to fight for me. Never argued. She existed, carefully, grateful for whatever attention he chose to give her. Ethan was different. My brother was born 3 years before me, and from the moment he arrived, my father decided what his future would be. Ethan would inherit the company. Ethan would carry the name forward. Ethan would become everything my father believed mattered. And me? I was extra. An afterthought. The daughter he never planned for, and never quite understood what to do with. The favoritism was so constant, so embedded in daily life, that eventually it stopped feeling unusual. It just became normal. Ethan got a brand new BMW for his 16th birthday, a ribbon across the hood. When I turned 16, my father forgot. My mother handed me a card with $200 inside and apologized without saying a word. Ethan spent his summers at Kensington Capital Group, learning the business, sitting in meetings, being introduced to people who would one day open doors for him. My father took him to dinners, to conferences, to rooms where decisions were made. He was preparing him, building him. Meanwhile, I was expected to stay out of the way, stay quiet, stay invisible. Christmas was the worst. Every year my father hosted elaborate holiday gatherings. The house would fill with powerful men in tailored suits, their wives covered in diamonds, their children already learning how to look important before they had done anything worth noticing. Decorators transformed the mansion into something out of a magazine. Caterers prepared food for 100 guests. Music echoed through the halls as champagne flowed and success was quietly celebrated. I was never allowed to attend. Year after year, I stood in the upstairs hallway, watching guests arrive. I would press my face against the banister, trying to catch fragments of that glittering world below. Laughter, music, the clink of glasses. A life that existed just a floor beneath me, and yet completely out of reach. My mother would come find me eventually. She would guide me gently back toward my room, her voice soft, always the same promise. Next year will be different. Next year you'll be old enough. Next year your father will change his mind. He never did. The message was never spoken out loud. It didn't need to be. Ethan belonged to that world. Wealth, power, endless opportunity. I didn't. When my father looked at his son, he saw himself. When he looked at me, he saw nothing worth investing in. School didn't change that. I attended the same elite academy as Ethan, walked the same polished hallways, sat in the same wood-paneled classrooms. But where teachers praised his leadership, his instincts for business, his future in finance, they didn't know what to do with me. I loved mathematics. Not the kind tied to balance sheets or quarterly returns. I was drawn to patterns, systems, the hidden logic beneath everything, markets, weather, behavior. The quiet rules that shaped outcomes long before anyone noticed them. My father called it pointless, a waste of time. When I was 15, I made the mistake of trying to prove him wrong. I showed him a program I had written. It wasn't advanced, not yet, but it worked. It could analyze patterns and predict, with surprising accuracy, how certain stocks might move based on historical data and market sentiment. I thought, maybe this time would be different. After all, his entire life revolved around understanding markets. Maybe he would finally see me. He barely looked at the screen. Then he pushed it away. "Machines don't replace instinct," he said flatly. "They amplify it, but only if you know what you're doing. Anyone can write code. Real wealth comes from relationships, reputation, knowing how to read a room. A pause. "That's something you will never understand." It wasn't just dismissal. It was final. It wasn't that he disagreed. It was that he had already decided I could never be right. In his mind, the equation had been set years ago. Ethan was the heir. Coraline was the disappointment. And nothing, no achievement, no evidence, would ever change that. My mother tried, in the only way she knew how. She praised my grades, came to my school events, told me I was special, even when no one else believed it. But she never challenged him, never stood between us. Her love was real, but it had no power, like a small flame trying to warm something already frozen solid. Sometimes I think she was afraid. My father controlled everything, the money, the house, the life she knew. To oppose him would mean risking all of it. So she chose peace. She chose comfort. And I learned, slowly, not to expect her to save me. The years blurred together, birthdays forgotten, achievements ignored, holidays spent alone in my room while laughter echoed from downstairs. By the time I graduated high school, I had already built something inside myself. Walls, strong enough to hold, thick enough to survive. Ethan tried, in his way. He would bring me leftovers from those parties, slip me small gifts when our father wasn't watching, tell me things would change when we were older. But even his kindness carried something I couldn't ignore. Pity. He was the prince, I was the extra. No quiet gestures could change that. When I left for college, I chose distance. A university far enough away that the Kensington name meant nothing. For the first time in my life, I could breathe. But the damage didn't disappear. Late at night, alone in my dorm room, I would replay everything. My father's voice, my mother's silence, the Christmas parties I was never allowed to attend, the empty seat at every family table, thousands of small moments that shaped something deeper than anger. They shaped expectation, or the lack of it. I stopped trusting, stopped hoping, told myself it didn't matter, that I would build something of my own, earn my own success, prove them wrong. What I didn't admit, what I couldn't admit yet, was that somewhere, beneath all of that, a part of me was already planning something else, something sharper, something patient, something that looked a lot like revenge. The moment that ended, everything came on a Tuesday in March, 3 weeks before my 24th birthday. I had finished graduate school 6 months earlier, a master's in computational mathematics from the University of Chicago. Honors. A thesis my advisor called groundbreaking. For the first time in my life, I had proof. Something real. Something undeniable. Or so I thought. I flew back to Westchester after my mother called. "A family discussion about your future," she said. Her tone was careful, almost hopeful. "Maybe your father is ready to bring you into the business," she added. "Maybe he understands now. Maybe your skills could be valuable." I wanted to believe her, despite everything, despite the years of silence and exclusion. There was still a part of me that wanted his approval. That part never really dies. It just learns to stay quiet. The house looked exactly the same. White columns, stone driveway, the fountain still running, even in the cold. A housekeeper I didn't recognize took my coat and led me upstairs. To his study. He was already there, behind his desk. Ethan sat nearby, stiff and silent. My mother sat off to the side, hands folded tightly in her lap. No one stood to greet me. No one said hello. My father gestured to the empty chair beside Ethan. I sat down. And suddenly, I didn't feel like a daughter. I felt like someone waiting for a verdict. The room smelled like cigar smoke and old wood. Behind him, a portrait of his grandfather hung on the wall, the man who started everything. 4 generations of wealth, 4 generations of power. According to him, I was supposed to be the 5th. "I have a proposal," he said without preamble. "Kensington Capital Group is expanding into algorithmic trading. We need someone with technical expertise to oversee the transition. Ethan suggested you might be a good fit for the role." I glanced at my brother. He gave me a small nod. Encouragement, mixed with something else. A warning. The position would report directly to Ethan, my father continued. You would oversee the technical implementation while he handles strategy and client relationships. A brief pause. It's an entry-level position, but there's room to grow if you prove yourself capable. Entry-level, after a master's degree, after everything I had worked for. Reporting to my brother, who had barely made it through his undergraduate business program. I took a slow breath, chose my words carefully. What kind of authority would I have over the algorithms, I asked. Would I be designing the strategies, or just implementing decisions made by others? A flicker of irritation crossed his face. You would implement, he said flatly. Strategy is Ethan's responsibility. You would provide technical support. Technical support. I repeated the phrase quietly, letting it settle. You want me to be a programmer, I said. An employee, following instructions. I want you to learn the business from the ground up, he replied. The way Ethan did, the way I did. No one starts at the top. Ethan started with his own office, I said, and direct access to you. That's not the ground up. The temperature in the room dropped. My mother shifted slightly, the soft sound of fabric brushing against itself filling the silence. Ethan stared down at the carpet like there was something there worth studying. My father leaned forward, his eyes hardened. Your brother earned his position through loyalty, through discipline. He understood that family comes first. A beat. He didn't run off to chase unrealistic fantasies about computers. My fantasies earned me a degree from one of the best programs in the country, I said, my voice steady but tightening. My thesis on predictive modeling was published in multiple journals. I've received offers from firms that would pay me twice what you're offering. Then take them. His voice turned cold. Go work for strangers. See how far your algorithms get you without the Kensington name opening doors. Something inside me broke. All the years of silence, all the moments I swallowed my words, all the quiet hope that maybe, just once, he would see me differently. It collapsed under that sentence. I stood up. My chair scraped against the floor, the sound sharp enough to cut through the air. The Kensington name has never opened a single door for me, I said. You made sure of that. My voice was shaking now, but I didn't stop. Every Christmas I was locked upstairs while Ethan stood downstairs shaking hands with people who mattered. Every birthday you forgot because you were too busy building your perfect son. The words came faster, sharper. Every time you looked at me like I didn't belong in my own home. I met his eyes. You never wanted a daughter. You wanted another son. And when you got me instead, you decided I wasn't worth anything. My mother made a small, broken sound. Ethan reached for my arm. Coraline. I pulled away. My father stood. Even at 62, he carried that same presence. Tall, controlled, used to being obeyed, but something had shifted. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. You're emotional, he said, his voice edged with contempt. Hysterical. This is exactly why women don't belong in finance. They can't separate emotion from logic. This was never about business, I said. It was about you needing someone to look down on so you could feel powerful. The words settled into the room, heavy, unavoidable. For a moment, no one moved. Then my father walked to the door and opened it. Get out. Miles, my mother's voice broke. Please, she's your daughter. She is not my daughter. He didn't even look at me when he said it, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond me, as if I had already disappeared. I gave you chance after chance to prove yourself, he continued, to be part of this family. And every time you chose to walk away. A pause. So go, he said. Build your world of algorithms and code. See how far it takes you. Without money, without connections, without anyone who cares whether you succeed or fail. I didn't respond. I didn't argue. I walked past him, down the staircase, through the foyer, out the front door, into the cold March afternoon. I didn't look back. I didn't say goodbye. I just kept walking, down the driveway, past the gates, until a taxi finally stopped. That night, I checked into a cheap motel near the airport. The room smelled like smoke and neglect. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my coat, staring at the ceiling for hours. Around midnight, my phone rang. Ethan. His voice was thick with guilt. "I'll stay in touch," he said. "No matter what he says, you're still my sister. That doesn't change." I wanted to believe him. Part of me did. But I knew our father. I knew how he worked. Loyalty wasn't optional in his world. It was enforced. Ethan had a life built inside that system. A career, a marriage, a future tied to our father's approval. And nothing survived once it stood against that. Not even family. I was 24 years old. Alone. A suitcase. Less than $3,000. No plan. Just one certainty. Tomorrow, I would start over. From nothing. And someday, I didn't know when, I didn't know how, but someday, I would make him regret every word. My first month of freedom was spent on a couch in Brooklyn. A friend from college let me stay, someone who owed me a favor. Her apartment was a fourth-floor walk-up in Bushwick, the kind of place where the radiator clanged all night, and the neighbors argued in 3 different languages through paper-thin walls. I paid $200 a week for that couch, for access to a shared bathroom. I shared that apartment with her and 2 other roommates. It was nothing like the estate in Westchester, but at least here, no one looked at me like I was a failure. Finding work turned out to be harder than I expected. I had the degree, the references, the credentials that should have opened doors. But the market had other plans. Positions at Goldman Sachs were already filled. Google wanted more industry experience. Hedge funds that had shown interest months earlier suddenly had hiring freezes, budget cuts, or vague concerns about fit. After a while, a thought began to settle in. My father. Miles Kensington knew everyone who mattered on Wall Street. One quiet conversation, one subtle warning about his difficult daughter. That was enough. Enough to close doors I couldn't even see, so I adjusted. Then I adjusted again. By April, I was working the breakfast shift at a diner in Midtown, pouring coffee for men in tailored suits, men who probably moved more money before 9 a.m. than I would see in years. The irony wasn't lost on me. Neither was the humiliation. A stained apron, practical shoes, standing beside tables where conversations revolved around markets, deals, volatility. But I listened. I listened to everything. Every conversation that drifted across those vinyl booths became data. I tracked patterns. Which sectors were heating up? Which ones were slowing down? What made them confident? What made them nervous? Interest rates? Global trade? Shifts no one noticed until it was too late. My training had taught me how to find signal in noise. Now I was surrounded by noise worth millions, and they were paying me to hear it. At night, I cleaned rooms at a boutique hotel on the Upper East Side. The work was exhausting, but it didn't require thought, which meant my mind stayed free. I would move down quiet hallways, pushing a cart, changing sheets, scrubbing bathrooms. And inside my head, I was building models, refining systems, connecting patterns from everything I had absorbed during the day. The kind of work my professors would have understood, even if no one else did. Then, one night in June, everything shifted. I was finishing my shift when I noticed a stack of papers left behind in one of the suites. Normally, I would have thrown them away without a second thought. But one phrase caught my attention. Predictive variance modeling. I paused, looked closer. It was a draft paper, algorithmic trading strategies, margins filled with handwritten notes, critiques, alternative approaches. Whoever wrote it understood the field at a level that matched, maybe even exceeded my own. I should have left it, called housekeeping, walked away. But something in the math felt unfinished, like it was waiting for someone to challenge it. Instead, I took out my phone and photographed every page. That document led me to a name, Adrian Cole. A quick search told me everything I needed to know. Former quant, top-tier background, now advising early-stage fintech founders. His office was in a converted warehouse in the Flatiron district, and according to his website, he was always looking for people who thought differently. I emailed him the next morning. No resume, no formal introduction, just a breakdown of his paper, 3 critical flaws in his variance assumptions, and a cleaner, more efficient way to fix them. He replied within 2 hours. We met the same week, a small cafe near his office. Adrian looked exactly how I expected, mid-40s, slightly disheveled, the kind of person who spent more time thinking than presenting. He ordered black coffee, then immediately started testing me. Question after question. Technical, precise, relentless. He wanted to know if what I wrote was real, or luck. I answered everything. By the end of that conversation, he made me an offer. Not as an employee, not as a junior analyst, but as a consultant. A small group of founders, he said, were building something new. They didn't need theory. They needed systems that worked, algorithms that could generate real results in real markets. The pay was terrible, barely enough to cover rent on a tiny studio in Long Island City. But the access was everything. Through Adrian, I met people who changed the trajectory of my life. Sofia Alvarez, a former derivatives trader who walked away from a 7-figure career to build her own fund. Ryan Park, a machine learning specialist whose models were years ahead of anything major banks were using. And others, founders, investors, builders, people who didn't see me as a problem to fix, but as someone worth listening to. For the first time, I belonged somewhere. And I didn't waste it. I worked 16 hours a day, building systems that could identify inefficiencies no human could see, models that combined sentiment, macro data, and real-time signals into something cohesive, something powerful. And the results spoke for themselves. Consistent, measurable, better than anything traditional strategies were producing. Sophia noticed first. After one presentation, she pulled me aside. Have you ever thought about starting your own fund? The idea felt ridiculous. I was 25, no money, no connections, no track record anyone recognized. But she didn't see what I lacked. She saw what I had built, and she knew what it meant. She introduced me to investors who cared about results, not pedigree, helped me navigate legal structures, regulatory requirements, everything I didn't know. She became something I had never really had before, a mentor. By the end of my second year in New York, I was ready. I launched CK Quantum Fund with $5 million in seed capital, a small group of investors who believed in the work. From the beginning, the structure was intentional, anonymous. My name didn't appear anywhere, public filings showed nothing. The structure ran through layers of intermediaries, enough to keep even institutional clients from knowing who they were really dealing with. To the outside world, the fund was a black box. Returns came in, performance spoke, but no one knew who was behind it. No one knew that the founder was a 26-year-old woman who had been cut off from her family and still lived on instant noodles most nights. The secrecy wasn't optional, it was protection. If my father found out what I was building, he wouldn't have stopped me directly. But he would have made sure every path forward became harder than it should have been. Miles Kensington didn't tolerate competition, especially not from someone he had already decided was worthless, so I disappeared. Signed documents with initials, worked through intermediaries, built everything quietly, piece by piece, while the man who cast me out continued to believe I was still pouring coffee, still cleaning rooms, still failing somewhere in the city. The truth would reach him eventually, just not yet. They all would. But not yet. I needed to become untouchable, too powerful to stop. The first 100 million didn't come easily. The first year nearly broke me. There were weeks when one bad position could have erased everything I had built. There were nights I stared at the numbers, wondering if I had miscalculated something I couldn't afford to fix. But once the system stabilized, everything accelerated. Within 18 months of launching CK Quantum Fund, my models were generating returns that made traditional hedge funds look slow, predictable, almost irrelevant. While the market struggled through volatility and uncertainty, my systems were already adjusting. They caught shifts others missed. a currency movement in Southeast Asia before it made headlines, a supply chain disruption that would ripple through semiconductor stocks, weeks before analysts began to notice, patterns in institutional buying that hinted at mergers long before they were announced. I wasn't predicting the future. I was reading the present, more clearly than anyone else. And that was enough. Word spread the way it always does in finance, quietly, through private conversations, encrypted messages. Whispers passed between people who understood what numbers like mine meant. Who is behind it? How are they doing this? Each version more exaggerated than the last. The mystery became part of the appeal. Clients didn't need a name. They only needed the results. By the time I turned 28, assets under management had passed $650 million. I moved out of my small studio in Queens into a modest place in Brooklyn Heights. I kept it simple. Unlisted address, minimal furnishings. Wealth, to me, wasn't about display. It was about freedom. I had watched my father build a life surrounded by excess, while treating people like numbers on a page. That was never going to be mine. Sofia Alvarez remained the closest thing I had to family, and the only person who truly knew what I was building. We met every week at a small Italian restaurant in Tribeca. The owner always placed us in the same back corner. Private, out of sight. Over pasta and wine, we talked about everything: strategy, scaling, risk, and the strange isolation that comes from building something no one is allowed to know you created. One evening, she arrived with a different energy. "Someone wants to meet you," she said. I looked up. "Who?" She held my gaze. "Victor Langford." The name hit instantly, not because he knew me, but because I knew exactly what he could do. Chairman of Langford Capital, one of the most powerful investment institutions in the world. Sovereign funds, billionaires, global influence. A partnership with Langford Capital would change everything. It would scale the fund beyond anything I had planned and bring me dangerously close to my father's world. "How did they find us?" I asked. Sophia shrugged slightly. "Performance gets noticed. Your last quarter made that unavoidable. They've been asking questions for months. Eventually, they found one of our investors." "What do they know about me?" "Nothing real," she said. "They think CK stands for some legacy family. I never corrected them. Old money trying to stay hidden. European, maybe? Middle Eastern?" A faint smile. "No one's looking for a 28-year-old woman from New York." The meeting took place at Langford Capital Tower in Midtown, a glass building that reflected the skyline like it belonged to it. I dressed carefully. Nothing flashy, nothing that would invite attention. Just enough to signal credibility, without giving anything away. Hair pulled back, minimal makeup. I looked exactly like what I needed to be. A representative, not the architect. Victor Langford met me on the 47th floor. He was older than I expected. Mid-60s, silver hair, calm presence. The kind of man who had spent decades at the top and knew exactly how to stay there. "Thank you for coming, Miss Whitmore," he said. I nodded. Clara Whitmore, Senior Portfolio Manager. A name that didn't exist, a role that did. The lie wasn't optional. Men like him knew men like my father. One careless detail, and everything I built could unravel. We spoke for 2 hours. He asked about structure, risk, long-term positioning, not surface-level questions, real ones. The kind that test whether you understand what you're doing or just got lucky. I answered carefully, revealing enough, protecting what mattered. By the end, he leaned back slightly. "Your strategies are exceptional," he said. "I've been in this industry for 40 years. I've never seen anything quite like this." A pause. "Whoever built this operates on a different level." "The founder prefers to remain anonymous," I said. "I understand." He studied me for a moment. "May I ask why?" "Because visibility attracts attention," I replied. "And attention doesn't always improve performance." He nodded slowly. "A rare perspective. Too many people in this industry chase recognition instead of results." Another pause, then. I'd like to propose a partnership. Langford Capital would provide distribution, infrastructure, access. In return, they would take a percentage. It was a straightforward deal, but the implications were massive. With their backing, the fund could grow 10 times over. Access markets I couldn't reach alone, gain legitimacy that would open doors globally. But there was risk. More visibility, more scrutiny, more people close enough to ask questions, and somewhere in the back of my mind, one thought kept returning. What if Victor Langford knew Miles Kensington? What if one conversation, at a dinner, a conference, a private event, connected the dots? What if everything collapsed because of one mistake? I said yes anyway. The next 2 years proved it was the right decision. Langford Capital opened doors I didn't even know existed. Institutional clients came in, pension funds, endowments, family offices. Assets climbed past $2.6 billion. Financial publications began to notice. They wrote about CK Quantum Fund as one of the most successful new funds in years. Speculation grew, but no one knew, not really. On the morning of my 31st birthday, I received a report from our accountants. I read the numbers once, then again. They didn't feel real. After fees, after structure, my personal stake was worth just over $1.2 billion. I sat there for a long time, looking at it. Not moving, not reacting, just processing. Outside my office window, the city moved like it always did. Millions of people chasing something, building something, losing something, and none of them knew that someone they had never heard of had just crossed into a different world. I thought about calling my mother, thought about reaching out to Ethan, thought about walking into my father's office, placing that report in front of him, and saying nothing. But I didn't, because the moment wasn't right. This wasn't just about success, it was about timing. The plan I had been carrying all this time needed more than success. It needed precision, the right stage, the right audience, the kind of moment where the truth couldn't be ignored or explained away. I could feel it coming, slow, inevitable, like a storm building just beyond the horizon. All I had to do was wait. The call came on a gray afternoon in November, 3 weeks before Christmas. I was in my office reviewing quarterly reports when my phone lit up. Victor Langford. We had only started speaking recently, carefully, through layers, never directly, but something in his tone, before he even said a word, felt different. He knew more than he had before. I need to discuss a potential opportunity, he said. A delicate one. I set my pen down. Go on. Are you familiar with Kensington Capital Group? The question hit harder than it should have. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Years of distance, years of silence, years of building something completely separate from that name. And now, it was back, spoken casually, like it meant nothing. I'm aware of them, I said evenly. Mid-sized firm, traditional strategies, conservative client base. That's the public version, he replied, a brief pause. The reality is more complicated. I stayed silent, listening. Over the past 18 months, Miles Kensington has been pursuing aggressive expansion. London, Hong Kong. A heavy push into algorithmic trading. Significant capital allocated to new infrastructure. That sounds ambitious. It is, Victor said, and poorly executed. His voice sharpened slightly. The technology rollout has failed. The models his team developed are outdated, underperforming. Meanwhile, expansion costs have strained liquidity. Another pause. He approached me last week. He's looking for a partnership with Langford Capital. I stood up, moved toward the window. I needed space. Outside, the city moved like nothing had changed, people walking through the cold, breath dissolving into the gray air. No one knew. The ground beneath me had just shifted. What kind of partnership? I asked. He needs capital, Victor said. The Hong Kong office is losing money. Clients are beginning to question stability. His tone softened slightly. He's a proud man. Asking for help wasn't easy, but he understands the situation. A beat. Without significant funding, the firm could be in serious trouble within 6 months. I stared out at the street. The irony was almost unbearable. My father, the man who built his identity on control, on success, on being right, was now depending on something he didn't even understand, and the only reason that help existed was because of me. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because any partnership would require a full evaluation of their technology," Victor said, "and that means input from CK Quantum Fund." A pause. "And there's something else." I didn't speak. "Your father specifically requested access to our algorithmic capabilities," he continued. "He's heard about a fund producing exceptional results through proprietary models." Another pause. "He wants that technology." I closed my eyes briefly. Of course he did. The same systems he once dismissed as worthless, the same work he threw away, was now the only thing that could save him. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "That we would consider it," Victor said, "and respond after the holidays." A slight hesitation. "I wanted to speak with you first, then more carefully. There's one more thing." I waited. "During our conversation, he spoke about legacy," Victor said, "about building something for the next generation, about passing the company on to his son." A quiet pause. "Ethan?" The name landed without surprise. Of course. I had been erased, completely. There was no space in his narrative for a daughter who had left, no mention, no acknowledgement, just absence. "Did he mention a daughter?" I asked before I could stop myself. The line went quiet, for a moment too long. "No," Victor said finally. Of course he hadn't. To him, I didn't exist anymore. A mistake corrected. A failure removed from the equation. A daughter erased so thoroughly he could talk about legacy, without ever acknowledging he had 2 children. The anger that followed wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It was sharp, cold, refined over years. "I'll need time to consider this," I said. "Of course," Victor replied. "Take whatever time you need." Then, just before ending the call, he also mentioned something else. I waited. "He's hosting a Christmas dinner at the Orion Summit Club." My grip tightened slightly on the phone. "He's invited potential partners, including Langford Capital." A pause. "He's eager to make an impression." Christmas dinner. The same event I had watched from upstairs every year. The same room I was never allowed to enter. The same celebration where success was displayed. And I was hidden. "Who did he invite?" I asked. "He invited me personally," Victor said. "I was planning to send someone in my place, but I can attend if you think it's necessary." There was a subtle shift in his tone. "You seem particularly interested in this situation." I forced my voice to remain steady. "Kensington Capital represents a significant investment opportunity," I said. "It would be irresponsible not to examine it closely." The explanation sounded thin, even to me. But Victor didn't press. We agreed to speak again after Thanksgiving. The call ended, and for the rest of that day, I couldn't focus on anything. Every document I opened blurred into shapes without meaning. Every email I tried to write stalled halfway through, unfinished, abandoned. My mind kept circling the same reality. My father's company was failing. And without realizing it, he had come to the one person he had erased, the daughter he threw away. There's a kind of symmetry to that, a quiet, almost cruel sense of balance. All those years he told me I would never succeed, never understand real business, never survive without him. And now, the man who said those words was depending on the very thing he had mocked. The systems I built in silence, the work he never even tried to understand. I could destroy him. The thought didn't come slowly. It arrived fully formed, clear, precise. I could walk away from the deal and watch Kensington Capital Group collapse under the weight of its own mistakes. I could leak information, Subtle at first, then undeniable, and accelerate the decline. I could influence Langford Capital, close doors quietly, make sure no one stepped in to help. It would be easy, efficient, complete. But that wasn't what I wanted. Not really. Destruction is quiet, it happens at a distance, and I had spent too many years being invisible. No. What I wanted was something else, something sharper. I wanted him to know. I wanted to see his face when he realized what he had thrown away. I wanted him to understand, clearly, publicly, that the daughter he called worthless had built something greater than anything he ever imagined. Not in private, not behind closed doors, but in front of the people who mattered to him, the people whose opinions shaped his world. The Christmas dinner. It was perfect. A room full of partners, investors, allies. A stage designed to celebrate his success. And I would turn it into something else entirely. I picked up my phone, dialed a number I hadn't touched in years. He answered on the third ring. Coraline? Ethan's voice carried something I hadn't heard before. Surprise, hesitation. Is that really you? We need to talk, I said. In person. A pause. Can you meet this weekend? Silence stretched between us. Then, yes. Another pause. Tell me where. Ethan looked older. We met in a quiet cafe in Boston, far enough from New York and Westchester that we wouldn't run into anyone from my father's world. He was already there when I arrived, sitting alone, a cup of coffee in front of him, untouched, long gone cold. For a moment, I just stood there, taking him in. The version of him I remembered had been effortless, confident, certain, the future already mapped out for him. But the man sitting across from me now looked worn, like something had been pressing down on him for years, and it hadn't stopped. You look good, he said as I sat down. He studied me for a second. Different. Stronger. That tends to happen over time, I replied. He nodded, accepted it, didn't argue. I tried to stay in touch, he said quietly, after you left, but Dad made it clear. Any contact with you would be seen as disloyalty. His fingers traced the edge of the cup. I should have done more. I know that. A breath. I was a coward. The apology hung between us, fragile, not enough to erase the years, but real. Part of me wanted to push back, to list every missed call, every birthday, every moment he wasn't there. But another part of me remembered something else. The boy who used to bring me food from downstairs. The brother who tried, imperfectly, quietly, to be kind. So I let it go. Tell me about Mom, I said instead. Ethan exhaled slowly. She asks about you, he said. Not when Dad's around, but sometimes, late at night, she comes over, just to talk. A pause. She wonders where you are, what you're doing. He glanced down. She kept things. Your report cards. Photos. Your graduation program. Another pause. She has a box hidden in her closet. Dad doesn't know about it. The image hit harder than I expected. My mother, living in that house, holding on to pieces of me, in secret, loving me, but never enough to stand up for me. Did she ever try to reach out? I asked. Ethan nodded slowly. Once, about 4 years ago. He looked up. She hired a private investigator, tried to find you. My chest tightened slightly. She wanted to write you a letter, apologize, explain everything. A small pause. But she got scared. Of him? I asked. Of everything, he said. Of him finding out, of you not wanting to hear from her, of breaking whatever life you had managed to build. He shook his head. So she didn't send it. Silence settled again. Then, she did do one thing. He reached into his jacket, pulled out an envelope, worn, slightly creased, older than it should have been. She gave me this 2 years ago, he said, told me to keep it, until the right moment. I took it. My fingers weren't steady. Inside, A cashier's check, dated years earlier, $75,000. The memo line read, "For your future." She withdrew it the week after you left, Ethan said quietly. She wanted to give it to you, but she didn't know how, without him finding out. He looked at me. So she held on to it, waiting for a moment she never had. I stared at the check, $75,000. Back then, it would have changed everything. I scrubbed floors, cleaned bathrooms, poured coffee, while my mother kept that check hidden away, too afraid to act. I didn't know what I felt, gratitude or anger. Why are you showing me this now? I asked. Ethan's expression shifted. Something heavier settled in. Because things are different, he said. Dad isn't what he used to be. He leaned back slightly, exhaling. The company is struggling. The expansion failed, and he's taking it out on everyone around him. A pause. My marriage is falling apart, Coraline. That caught me off guard. Lydia can't stand being around him anymore, he continued quietly. And I'm so buried trying to hold the firm together. I barely see my kids. His voice tightened. Last month, she told me she's thinking about leaving. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be. He shook his head. I made my choices. Then he leaned forward, lowering his voice. But you need to understand something. I didn't interrupt. He called a meeting last week, Ethan said, laid out his plan to save the company. A pause. He's counting on a partnership with Langford Capital, the funding, the technology. Another pause. Without it, Kensington Capital won't survive another year. I kept my expression steady, even as my pulse picked up. And what does that have to do with me? I asked. Ethan studied me carefully, the way our father used to. Maybe nothing, he said. Maybe everything. Silence stretched between us. You were always obsessed with algorithms, he continued, with predictive modeling, systems no one else understood. A beat. And now, out of nowhere, there's this fund, CK Quantum. He held my gaze. Returns no one can explain. Strategies that sound familiar. The air in the cafe suddenly felt warmer. He continued almost quietly. I've been tracking this fund for months, he said. The patterns, the timing, the way it thinks. A faint pause. That name, it couldn't be coincidence. I didn't move, didn't react. That's quite a theory, I said evenly. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Outside, people moved through the cold. Normal lives, uncomplicated, unaffected. If I were involved with that fund, I said carefully, what would you do with that information? Ethan shook his head immediately. Nothing. A pause. I didn't come here to use it against you. His voice cracked slightly. I came because I miss my sister. That landed harder than anything else he'd said. I've spent years watching him destroy everything, he continued. The company, his relationships, our family. He looked at me. And if you found a way to build something despite all of that, a breath, then I want to help, however I can. With what? I asked. With whatever you're planning. He didn't look away. I know you, Coraline. You didn't call me after all this time just to catch up. Another pause. Something is happening. Something connected to him and that Christmas dinner he keeps talking about. I could have lied, kept everything in place, maintained the distance I had built so carefully, but looking at him, tired, honest, worn down by the same man who shaped both of us, I realized something. I didn't want to do this alone, not anymore. The plan I had been building needed someone on the inside, someone who understood how my father operated, his habits, his weaknesses, his patterns, someone who had lived under the same pressure. There's a dinner, I said quietly. Christmas Eve, at the Orion Summit Club. Ethan nodded. I know, I'll be there. So will I. That stopped him. I let the silence settle. Before the night ends, I continued, everyone in that room is going to find out who built the fund that's keeping his company alive. Ethan's eyes widened. You're going to reveal yourself? I'm going to show him what his worthless daughter built, I said, while he was busy pretending I didn't exist. I folded the envelope, slipped it into my bag. Then I met his eyes. The question is, are you willing to stand with me when I do? He didn't answer right away, just sat there, thinking. Then finally, tell me what you need. His voice was steady, and for the first time in a long time, he sounded certain. The envelope arrived the first Monday of December, delivered by a uniformed courier who waited for my signature. Heavy cream paper, embossed return address, a gold crest pressed into the back flap. I recognized it immediately. My father's stationery, unchanged, expensive, precise, designed to signal status before a single word was read. I carried it to my desk, set it down, and stared at it for a long moment. 7 years of silence, replaced by a formal invitation. Inside, a single card, handwritten. My mother's script, elegant, practiced, controlled. Dear Coraline, your father and I would be honored by your presence at our annual Christmas dinner on December 24th. The event will be held at the Orion Summit Club, beginning at 7 p.m. We hope this invitation finds you well, and that we may have the opportunity to reconnect as a family this holiday season. With warmth, Naomi Kensington. Polite, careful, empty, every word measured, every emotion contained. My mother's handwriting, my father's paper. A shared invitation that likely took weeks of quiet negotiation between two people who had spent their entire marriage avoiding anything difficult. But I knew what this really was. Ethan had already told me. This wasn't about family. It was about presentation. My father was planning to use that dinner as a stage, to announce the Langford partnership, to prove to everyone watching that he was still in control, still winning. And having his entire family there, even the daughter he had discarded, would make the image complete, a symbol of unity, of legacy, of strength. What he didn't know was that I already knew everything. Victor Langford had told me the structure of the deal, the timing, the exact language my father planned to use when he introduced his new technology. Technology he didn't understand, technology that existed because of me. He thought he was preparing a celebration. What he didn't realize was that he was building the perfect stage for his own undoing. Victor Langford still didn't know who I really was, but as a matter of professional courtesy, he had shared everything with the senior representative of CK Quantum Fund, which meant me. My father was preparing his grand announcement on a foundation he didn't understand. The technology he planned to praise was already outdated. The system he believed would save his company depended entirely on something I could take away with a single decision. One word from me, and the entire deal would collapse. I picked up my phone, dialed the number on the invitation. She answered on the second ring. Kensington Residence. A pause. Hello? Mom. Silence. Long enough that I could hear her breathing. I could picture her, standing in that kitchen, surrounded by polished stone and perfection, trying to process a voice she hadn't heard in years. Coraline. My name came out almost like a whisper. You received the invitation? I did. Another pause. Will you come? She faltered, then quickly corrected herself. We would very much like you to be there. Your father and I both feel that enough time has passed, that perhaps we can begin again. The phrasing was too careful, too deliberate. I could hear him in her words. He had coached this, shaped every sentence. Miles Kensington never did anything without purpose. If he wanted me in that room, it wasn't about reconciliation. It was strategy. I'll be there, I said. A soft, broken breath. Oh, Coraline, I'm so glad. Emotion slipped into her voice now, uncontrolled. I've thought about you every day, she said. Wondered where you were, what you were doing. A pause. I should have reached out sooner. I should have been braver. We can talk about that when I see you, I said gently. Yes, yes, of course. She was crying now, trying to hide it. Is there anything you need? She asked quickly. Dietary preferences, or we can arrange a car if transportation is difficult. Transportation. After all this time, she still thought I might not be able to afford a ride into Manhattan. Still believed I was struggling, that I had become exactly what my father predicted. That won't be necessary, I said. I can manage. We spoke for a few more minutes. Polite, careful, avoiding everything that mattered. She asked vague questions. I gave vague answers. By the time the call ended, I felt drained, as if the conversation had taken something from me instead of giving anything back. The next few weeks moved quickly, quietly. Ethan and I met twice more. We planned everything. Guest lists, seating, timing. He told me exactly when my father would speak, when the announcement would happen, who would be watching. In return, I told him enough. Not everything, but enough for him to understand what I had built. His reaction said more than words ever could. Shock, respect, something close to disbelief. He had believed it. All those years, that I was struggling, that I had failed. Victor and I spoke regularly. He remained confident in the partnership, but deferred to me on anything technical. During one call, he mentioned something new. There's growing interest in CK Quantum Fund, he said. Journalists are asking questions. I stayed quiet. Someone leaked that the founder may be a woman, he continued. There's speculation about a female billionaire operating anonymously. I almost smiled. Let them speculate. They won't forever, he said. These things always surface. A pause. Have you considered how you'll handle it when they do? I had. Every night, lying awake, replaying the moment. The words I would say, the silence that would follow, the look on my father's face. When it happens, I said, I want it to happen on my terms. My timing. A smart approach, Victor said. Then, one more thing. Miles Kensington has requested that representatives from CK Quantum attend his Christmas dinner. Of course he had. He wants to meet the people behind the technology, Victor added. The ones who will supposedly transform his firm. He wanted to meet me, he just didn't know it. To him, CK Quantum was an asset. A tool. Something to acquire. And display. The idea that his daughter was behind it had never even crossed his mind. Tell him the founder prefers to remain anonymous, I said. But a senior representative will attend. And who should I say that is? I smiled slightly. Clara Whitmore. A pause. She's been with the fund since the beginning, I added. She'll make an impression. After the call, I spent the rest of the afternoon deciding what to wear. Nothing expensive, nothing that would draw attention. I wanted to walk into that room exactly the way they expected. The version of me they had already defined. The daughter who never quite measured up. The one who left and failed. The transformation would come later. 19 days until Christmas Eve. 19 days until everything changed. Years of patience. Years of silence. About to converge into a single moment. My father thought he was preparing a celebration. A declaration of control. A return to power. He had no idea. He was building the stage for mine. I could wait a little longer. After everything I had endured, 19 days was nothing. The Orion Summit Club occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower overlooking Central Park. From the outside, it shimmered against the December night, windows lit like diamonds suspended above the city. I arrived at 7:15, late enough that most of the guests had already gathered, early enough that my entrance wouldn't become a moment. The elevator carried me upward in silence, polished brass doors reflecting my image back at me, a simple black dress, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back, clean and understated. Nothing about me suggested wealth or power. That was intentional. The doors opened onto a foyer filled with Christmas greenery. Pine wreaths, garlands, a towering tree in the corner, heavy with ornaments that likely cost more than most people's rent. Somewhere deeper inside, a jazz quartet played soft holiday standards. Waiters moved through the room with quiet precision, balancing trays of champagne and carefully plated appetizers. No expense had been spared. This night was designed. Every detail curated to project confidence, stability, control. My father's return to relevance. I spotted him immediately. Miles Kensington stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, surrounded by men in expensive suits, holding court. His voice carried easily across the room, punctuated by laughter that came just a second too quickly. Laughter from people who understood exactly what pleased him. He looked the same, composed, imposing, perfectly in control. My mother stood nearby, elegant in deep burgundy, present but never central. Ethan stood slightly apart from the group, Lydia beside him. Even from a distance, the tension between them was visible. I took a breath and stepped forward. My father noticed me first. His eyes moved over me in a single practiced sweep, evaluating, measuring. Whatever he saw seemed to confirm exactly what he expected. A small, controlled smile formed. Coraline. He didn't move, didn't step forward, didn't even leave his circle, just acknowledged me with a nod, as if I were someone requesting his attention. You made it. Thank you for inviting me. Your mother insisted. He turned back to the group. Gentlemen, my daughter, Coraline. She's been living in the city, pursuing various interests. Various interests. All those years. Reduced to 2 empty words. One of the men stepped forward, offering his hand. Nice to meet you. What line of work are you in? Before I could answer, Coraline has explored a few directions, my father said smoothly. She studied computers at university, if I remember correctly. Never quite found her place in business. Polite laughter, sympathetic nods, the kind reserved for unfortunate situations that don't belong in serious conversation. I said nothing. The night had only just begun. Dinner was served in the main dining room, a wide, vaulted space with a ceiling painted to resemble a winter sky. My seat was exactly where I expected, at the far end of the table, as far from my father as possible, placed between 2 junior partners from firms I didn't recognize, present but irrelevant, included but clearly unimportant. My father controlled the room. Every conversation bent toward him. He spoke about expansion, about strategy, about vision, and finally, about the partnership with Langford Capital, the one that would revolutionize his firm's technological capabilities, the one that would secure his future. His guests listened with admiration, carefully timed questions, measured praise. No one mentioned the failed expansion, the instability, the clients who had quietly walked away. In his version of the story, everything was intentional. Every misstep was part of a larger success. Between courses, my mother came to my side. Her eyes were bright, holding back emotion she couldn't fully control. I'm so glad you came, she whispered, squeezing my hand beneath the table. I know this is difficult, but it means everything to me. Does it mean everything to him too? I asked quietly. She flinched, just slightly. Your father has his own way of showing things, she said. But underneath, he does care. I looked at her. 24 years of exclusion, years of silence, and still, she defended him, still chose loyalty over truth. I squeezed her hand once, said nothing. Dessert arrived with ceremony. Individual chocolate soufflés, topped with gold leaf. Of course they were. My father stood, glass raised. The room fell silent immediately. I want to thank you all for being here tonight, he began. Christmas has always been important to the Kensington family, a time to gather, to reflect on what we've achieved, and to look ahead. A pause. He let the room settle into him. As many of you know, Kensington Capital has undergone significant transformation. New markets, new technologies, new capabilities. His smile widened. And tonight, I'm pleased to announce that we are finalizing a partnership with Langford Capital, one that will bring world-class algorithmic trading to our platform. Applause followed. Polite, controlled, expected. He accepted it like it belonged to him. Then, his gaze shifted. Toward me. Of course, he continued lightly, not everyone at this table chose the same path to success. A ripple of anticipation moved through the room. My daughter Coraline, for example. A faint smile, soft laughter, knowing, indulgent, the kind that dismissed without needing to say anything directly. She decided to pursue her own direction, computers, algorithms, various experiments. I remember telling her once that machines could never replace human judgment, that real success required relationships, instinct, the ability to close a deal. He shook his head lightly, almost amused. She disagreed, quite strongly if I remember correctly, thought she knew better than her old father. Laughter followed, polite, knowing, comfortable. My face burned, but I didn't let it show. So tell me, Coraline. He raised his glass toward me, a gesture that looked like a toast, but carried the weight of a challenge. After all these years in the real world, do you finally understand what I was trying to teach you? A pause. Have you finally learned that dreams don't survive in the real world? Every eye in the room turned. I could feel it. Judgment, amusement, quiet satisfaction at watching him put me back in place. Across the table, Ethan caught my eye. His jaw tightened, his hands clenched around his napkin. He started to rise. I gave him a small shake of my head. Not yet. I've learned many things, I said quietly, holding my father's gaze. More than you realize. He laughed, dismissed it, turned away as if my answer meant nothing. The room relaxed again. Conversations resumed. Glasses refilled. Plates cleared. No one noticed when Victor Langford entered. No one except me. He moved through the room with quiet authority, greeting guests, shaking hands, exchanging practiced smiles. My father spotted him almost immediately. Victor. He crossed the room, hand already extended. I was beginning to think you wouldn't make it. My apologies, Victor said calmly. Business required my attention. His eyes moved across the room, then paused, just briefly, on me, barely noticeable. I trust the evening has been productive. Very, my father said. I was just telling everyone about our partnership. The response has been overwhelmingly positive. Excellent. Victor accepted a glass of champagne. Then, there is a development we should discuss. A slight shift. My father's smile tightened. Of course, perhaps we can speak privately after dinner. I think it's best to address it now. Victor's tone remained calm, but firm. In front of your guests. Conversations faded, music softened, then stopped entirely. All attention shifted. My father stood beside him, still smiling, but the edges of that control were starting to crack. This wasn't part of his plan. As many of you know, Victor began, turning slightly to the room, Langford Capital has been exploring a partnership with Kensington Capital. A few nods. What you may not know is that the core technology behind this partnership comes from a fund called CK Quantum Fund. Murmurs spread quietly, interest rising. Over the past several years, this fund has delivered some of the most impressive returns in the industry. Their algorithmic trading strategies are, quite frankly, revolutionary. My father nodded along, though there was now a hint of uncertainty in his expression. The founder of CK Quantum Fund has remained completely anonymous since its inception, Victor continued. Very few people know who built it. A pause. I only learned the truth recently. Another pause. And I must admit, it was unexpected. The room stilled. Something was building. Many have speculated, he went on. Some believed it was old European money. Others assumed a reclusive tech billionaire or a team of elite analysts. A faint smile. The truth is far more interesting. My father shifted, impatience slipping through. Victor, perhaps we can... No. Still calm, still controlled. but final. I think everyone should hear this. Then, he turned toward my end of the table. Every gaze followed. I debated whether to keep this confidential, Victor said, but given the significance of this partnership, transparency matters. The founder of CK Quantum Fund is here tonight. Silence. She has been here all evening, listening, watching. Ladies and gentlemen, he extended his hand. Allow me to introduce the founder of CK Quantum Fund. A single beat. Coraline Kensington. Silence. Absolute. I stood, slowly, deliberately. Around me, faces shifted, shock, disbelief, recognition dawning in real time. But I didn't look at them. I looked at him, my father. The color drained from his face. His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in my life, he had nothing to say. That's impossible, he finally managed. Coraline she couldn't build $1 billion fund, I said, with the same algorithms you called foolish? I stepped toward him, slow, measured. You're right, I continued quietly. By your standards, it should have been impossible. A pause. A 24-year-old woman, no money, no connections, no support. Another step closer. By every rule you believe in, I should have failed. I stopped in front of him, close enough to see the tension in his face. Instead, my voice stayed calm, controlled. I built everything without them. A breath. While you were expanding into markets you didn't understand, losing money on technology you couldn't manage. I held his gaze. I was building systems that outperform everything your firm has ever created. Silence pressed in from every side. The partnership you announced tonight, I paused, let it land. The technology you believe will save your company, it exists because of me. Kensington Capital's future comes from my fund, from my work, from the daughter you said would never amount to anything. The room didn't move, no one spoke. Even the servers had stopped where they stood, caught in the weight of the moment. My mother sat frozen, tears slipping silently down her face. Ethan had risen from his chair, standing apart now, his expression caught between grief and something that looked almost like relief. Lydia pressed a hand to her chest, her shock completely unhidden. And my father? I watched it happen. The cracks, the slight tremor in his hands, the blink, too fast, too frequent, the search for something, anything that could pull him back into control. You're lying, he said, but there was no strength behind it. This is some kind of trick, a setup to embarrass me. Victor, I said without looking away from him, would you like to confirm that? Victor didn't hesitate. Coraline Kensington is the founder and majority owner of CK Quantum Fund, he said. I've reviewed the documentation myself. There is no question about her identity, or her results. But she was... My father stopped. The version of reality he had lived in no longer fit. She was working in a diner, he said, grasping for it. Living in some apartment in Queens. She had nothing. I had everything you never valued, I said quietly. And I meant it. The discipline, the clarity, the certainty that I would prove him wrong. He stared at me, really stared, as if for the first time he was actually seeing me. Maybe he was. My entire life, I continued, you looked at me and saw a problem, a failure, something to ignore. A breath. Now you don't have a choice. The room held still. The technology your company needs to survive exists because you threw me away. I let each word land. The algorithms you dismissed are now worth more than your entire firm. A pause. The daughter you erased from your legacy is the only reason your company still has one. I stepped back, creating just enough distance. But here's what you need to understand. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. This partnership, the one you're presenting tonight as your triumph, a beat. It only exists because I haven't decided to end it. I held his gaze. Your company's survival is in my hands now. Silence. Heavy. Final. For the first time in his life. Miles Kensington had nothing to say. Around us, the decorations shimmered with hollow warmth. The music hadn't resumed. No one dared to speak. All of it, compressed into a single moment. A reckoning. And the room waited. So did I. For a long moment, he said nothing. For the first time in my life, he had nothing. Then, slowly, he rebuilt himself. The shock drained from his face, replaced by something colder, familiar. He straightened his jacket, adjusted his posture, rebuilt himself in real time. Well, he said, voice steadier now, it seems my daughter inherited more of my instincts than I realized. A few uneasy laughs broke through the silence. He seized them immediately. I always knew she had potential, he continued. Perhaps my methods were unconventional, a faint smile. But clearly, they were effective. He spread his hands. What father wouldn't be proud to see his child achieve this level of success? He wasn't apologizing. He was adapting. For a moment, I almost couldn't process it. After everything, he was claiming it, rewriting it right here. Tough love, I repeated slowly, letting the words hang. Is that what you call it? My voice sharpened, just enough. Telling your daughter she would never amount to anything? Is that what you call excluding her from every family gathering growing up? Is that what you call throwing her out with nothing because she refused to work for you? The warmth vanished from his face. Coraline, this isn't the time. You chose the time. I cut him off, still calm, still controlled. You invited all of these people to celebrate your success. You used this dinner to humiliate me in front of them. You asked me, publicly, if I had finally learned that dreams don't pay bills. I turned slightly, addressing the room. Let me tell you what tough love looked like in this family. Silence deepened. My brother received a car for his 16th birthday. I was forgotten. He spent summers learning the business. I was told to stay upstairs during Christmas parties because I didn't belong. A pause. When I graduated with honors, my father didn't show up. When I showed him the algorithms that built my company, I met his eyes again. He called them worthless. My mother made a soft, broken sound. I didn't stop. Years ago, I stood in his study and said I wanted to build something on my own. For that, I was told I was no longer his daughter. And I was thrown out. That's not, he started. I spent months surviving, I continued over him, sleeping on couches, working in diners, cleaning hotel rooms. No one moved. No one spoke. While you were telling everyone I had failed, I let the words settle. I was building something that now controls more capital than your entire firm. A breath. While you were running your company into the ground, I was building the technology you now depend on. Silence. Total. The same people who had laughed minutes ago now looked anywhere but at him. Then, Ethan stepped forward. She's telling the truth, he said. My father turned sharply. Ethan, no. His voice cracked, but he didn't step back. I'm done pretending. I watched you treat Coraline like she was nothing. Her entire life. Ethan's voice was shaking now, but he didn't stop. I watched Mom hide her birthday cards, her report cards, because she was afraid of how you'd react. A breath. I watched you erase your own daughter from family photos. You have no idea what you're talking about. I have every idea. Ethan stepped forward, came to stand beside me. You used me, he said. You made me a weapon against her. His voice broke. You forced me to choose between being your heir and being her brother. A pause. And I chose wrong, for far too long. My mother stood, tears no longer hidden. She didn't go to my father. She came to us, to Ethan, to me. She took my hand in both of hers, holding it tightly. I'm so sorry, she whispered. For everything. Her voice trembled. For everything I should have done, and didn't. For every time I stayed quiet, because I was afraid. We stood there together, the three of us, facing him, behind him, his carefully constructed world, business partners, allies, people who had admired him for years, watched something they had never been meant to see, the truth. My father looked at us, his wife, his son, standing with the daughter he had erased. For a moment, something shifted in his eyes. Not quite regret, but something close. Something that looked like understanding, that his control had limits. "This is absurd," he said, but the certainty was gone. But the authority was gone, reduced. "A misunderstanding that's gotten out of hand." A pause. "Coraline, whatever this is, we can discuss it privately." "No," I shook my head. "You spent your entire life protecting your reputation," I said. "More than your family." I stepped forward. "So let your reputation hear the truth." I released my mother's hand, closed the distance between us one last time. "Kensington Capital is still standing right now because CK Quantum hasn't walked away." A pause. "The technology you're relying on, the systems you're presenting as your future, come from me." I let that settle. "The investors keeping your firm afloat?" Another beat. "They trust my fund." Silence. Heavy. "I could end this," I said quietly. "One call, and everything you built disappears." For the first time, fear appeared on his face. Real. Unfiltered. But I didn't look away. "But I'm not going to do that." The tension shifted. Confusion now. Suspicion. He was searching for the angle. The trap. "Destroying you would be easy," I continued, "and it would make me exactly like you." A pause. "Someone who uses power to crush anyone who stands in the way." I straightened. Calm. Certain. "Instead, I'm going to do something you never did for me." I held his gaze. "I'm giving you a choice." "What kind of choice?" he asked. "The partnership continues," I said, "but not on your terms." Silence deepened again. "CK Quantum will take controlling interest in your technology division. You step back. People who actually understand what they're doing take over." Another pause. "Ethan will oversee the restructuring." I didn't look at him, but I knew he heard it. "He spent years fixing your mistakes quietly. It's time that changes." My father's jaw tightened. "You expect me to hand over my company? I expect you to accept reality." My voice stayed level, unmoving. "Accept this, and your company survives. Refuse, and I walk away." A beat. No technology, no Langford backing. I let the words settle fully. "Your firm collapses within a year." The room held its breath. He stood there, still. For a man who had controlled everything his entire life, this was something else. Every option required him to give something up. Power, control, identity. Finally, his shoulders dropped. Barely, but enough. "It seems I don't have a choice." "You have exactly the choice you gave me back then." I stepped back, creating distance. "The difference is, I'm offering you a future." A pause. "More than you ever offered me." I turned, walked toward the exit. Ethan followed. Then my mother. Behind us. The man who once controlled everything stood alone, surrounded by his perfect decorations, his silent audience, his collapsing narrative. For the first time, he understood what it meant to lose. The cold December air hit my face as I stepped outside, sharp, clean, like something beginning again. Behind me, the tower still glowed with holiday light. Inside, everything had changed. The story would spread. By morning, everyone who mattered would know what he had lost, what I had built. I didn't look back. A moment later, the doors opened again. My mother stepped out, Ethan behind her. We stood there together, breath turning to mist in the cold. No one spoke at first. Some moments need silence. Then, my mother reached for my hand. "I should have protected you," she said, her voice breaking. "All those years. I told myself I was keeping the peace." A pause. That things would get better if I just waited. She shook her head. "I was wrong. I was afraid." "Fear isn't an excuse," she added softly. "Not when your child is hurting." She tightened her grip on my hand. I kept that check all those years, telling myself I'd find the right time. Her voice dropped. "There was never a right time." A breath. "I just wasn't brave enough to make one." I thought about the woman I had been at 24, desperate, alone, counting every dollar just to survive another week. $75,000 would have changed everything. Back then, it would have meant time, options, the space to think instead of just survive. Instead, I built everything from nothing. Every step, every decision, mine. Without the safety net my mother had been too afraid to give me. "Maybe it was better this way," I said slowly. "Maybe I needed to do it alone." "That doesn't make what I did right." "No," I said, "it doesn't." I turned to face her fully. "But I'm not interested in holding on to anger anymore." A breath. It served its purpose. It pushed me. It made me prove something that needed proving. Another pause. "But now, I want to move forward." My mother broke. Fresh tears, uncontrolled this time. She pulled me into an embrace. For a moment I let myself stay there. Didn't resist it. Didn't analyze it. Just felt it. The warmth. The familiarity. She smelled the same, roses and vanilla. Some things don't change, even after everything else does. Ethan waited until we stepped apart. "What happens now?" he asked. "With the company, I mean." "That depends on you." I studied him under the streetlights. "The offer I made inside was real. CK Quantum will partner with Kensington Capital." A pause. "But only if you take control." "Dad's era is over." I held his gaze. "The question is, do you want to build something new, or walk away from it entirely?" He didn't answer immediately. He actually thought about it. Really thought. "Lydia wants me to leave," he admitted quietly. "She's been asking for years." A small pause. "To find something else, something that doesn't revolve around him." His voice tightened. "It's almost cost me my marriage." "What do you want?" I asked. He met my eyes. "I want to fix things." A breath. "Not just with you, though that matters more than I can say." Another pause. "I want to build something I can actually respect, something that doesn't require pretending or hurting people." I nodded. "Then stay." Fix what he broke. Build the company it should have been. A small smile appeared. Careful, but real. "Partners?" he asked. "Partners." We shook hands there on the sidewalk. Simple, but it meant everything. The brother who once chose safety was choosing something else now. And for the first time, I was letting someone in. A black sedan pulled up to the curb, the car I had arranged earlier. The driver stepped out, opening the door. "I should go," I said. "There's a lot to handle. Lawyers, contracts, restructuring. Victor will want to revise the partnership terms." My mother touched my arm. "Will we see you again?" she asked softly. "Not like before?" I hesitated. Then, "I'm not disappearing this time." The words felt unfamiliar, but right. "We have a lot of time to make up for." A pause. "I'm not saying it'll be easy. And I'm not ready to forget everything. But I'm willing to try." She nodded, crying again. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. I got into the car, watched them through the window as we pulled away, two figures standing together in the cold. Getting smaller with distance. My family. Broken. imperfect, but maybe finally beginning to heal. The drive back to Brooklyn took nearly an hour. Holiday traffic, lights everywhere, Manhattan fading behind me as we crossed the bridge. The city softened. Quieter streets, brownstones, windows glowing with warmth. My apartment was exactly as I left it, simple, functional, mine. I hung up my coat, poured a glass of wine, and stood by the window. Years ago, I stood in a cheap motel room, staring at a stained ceiling, wondering if I would make it through the week. I was 24, broke, alone, certain of only one thing, that I would make him regret it. Tonight, that moment had come. Everything had unfolded exactly as I imagined, maybe even better. He had been exposed, stripped of control, and for the first time in his life, he couldn't rewrite the truth. Forced to face the truth, in front of everyone who mattered to him. Justice. Complete. So why did it feel quiet? I expected something else. Triumph, relief, victory. Instead, I felt still. Not empty, just finished, complete. Like something had ended. Revenge had carried me for years. It gave me direction, focus, a reason to keep going when everything felt impossible. But it had also held me in place. As long as I defined myself by what he did to me, I was still tied to him, still living in his shadow. Tonight, I stepped out of it, for good. The wine tasted better than I expected. Snow began to fall outside. Soft, quiet, beautiful. Tomorrow would bring complexity, decisions, adjustments, new challenges. But tonight, I let myself exist in the moment, grateful for how far I had come, curious about where I would go next. My phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. A photo. Him, Lydia, their kids, standing around a Christmas tree, smiling. The caption, "Thank you for giving me my family back." I smiled, typed back, "Merry Christmas." Then set the phone down, finished my wine, and watched the snow fall over Brooklyn until sleep finally came. The story of Coraline Kensington, the daughter who was dismissed and became something more, was just beginning. But the story of revenge, that one was over. If you recognize something in this, the silence, the doubt, the need to prove yourself. If you recognize yourself in that silence, in that doubt, in that quiet hunger to prove your worth, listen carefully. You don't need their approval to become something powerful. You don't need their apology to move forward. And you don't need revenge to validate your existence. Pain can be a catalyst, but it should never become your identity. Because the moment you build your life around proving someone wrong, you're still letting them define you. Real strength begins when you stop asking, "Will they finally see me?" and start asking, "What do I want to build next?" There will always be people who underestimate you, who dismiss you, who decide your limits before you even begin. Let them, because your future is not shaped by their belief. It's shaped by your persistence, your discipline, your willingness to keep going when no one is watching. And when you finally rise, don't just prove them wrong. Outgrow them. That is freedom, that is power, and that is the only kind of victory that lasts. And if this story stayed with you, if even a small part of it felt familiar, take a second. Hit like so more people who need this message can find it. Share it with someone who's still fighting quietly, still trying to prove their worth in a world that overlooked them. And resonated with you the most. Because your voice matters more than you think. If you believe in stories about strength, truth, and choosing your own path, don't that remind you who you are and who you can become.